talk about creating safe spaces in Castro. Let's talk about creating safe spaces in Castro.
Did somebody say recovery?
Let's talk about meetings, sex and recovery.
Sober sex? Did somebody say dick?
Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about...
Welcome, you are at the CCC. Welcome, you are at the CCC. Bonnie?
I was still hearing the music. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Where there are no outside issues with Bonnie Violet.
And Lulu.
Each week, we will provide and create a brave space where we engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
And our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for people in recovery.
By tackling topics sometimes used to separate us.
And so remember to like, share, and
ding that bell.
Ding
that bell.
So that was interesting. You could hear the music, Bonnie?
I don't know if there was just a delay on my end, but it was like you were talking, but the music was still playing, and I was confused.
Okay. Well, let's make sure. If you're listening to us now, can you hear us? That's the most important thing. If you can hear us clearly, then we're good. Other stuff, we practice the third step around here. Things don't have to go perfectly. Anyway.
Right. And is it rule 72, 92? What is that?
Rule 62.
Rule 62, yes.
All right.
I screen name on Recon.
I love that.
Nice.
So how are you and where are you? That we play the game. Where in the world is Bonnie San Diego?
All right. I am in Maricopa, Arizona, which is just outside of Phoenix, after having a cram-packed, full, wonderful weekend in San Francisco.
Yeah, it was really nice to see you. And it was. How was your week? Other than being here, how would you rate your week?
I would say it was a 10 out of 10. Yeah.
Nice, very nice.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
Same here. I mean, it's like honestly, it's like I don't want to say I have low expectations for my weeks, but when shit doesn't go really bad, I'm good, and shit didn't go really bad.
Right.
Yeah, Stephen, our guest here today. How was your week?
I think it's been pretty good, actually.
I know.
Yeah, no one drank or used in my life this week. So that's a good week.
Makes it. Yeah. This past weekend we participated. Bonnie was here. You were here for other reasons, but one of our fellows had a celebration of life, and it was really kind of it was a beautiful experience. It was very kind of emotional, and I'm not a big crier, but it's like. It was tough, but it's nice every now and then to kind of feel shit.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was the first time in a while that so many people from recovery, at least for me, was in the room at the same time. So it was really nice to kind of be in that, connectedness with so many people around like the grief and loss,
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I think that that I got from this weekend, a few shares is when you get into recovery, what recovery provides for you is this kind of built-in support system and family. If you choose to take advantage of it, and it's a beautiful thing. It's like it cuts the middleman, because before, when I was drinking and using it, I had to find my people at the bars or whatever. It wasn't always the easiest thing to do. So get this built-in group of people who are doing the same kind of work, hopefully, on intimacy and kind of relationships. So it's a cool thing. So today, our topic, I'm really, really, really super excited. We're going to talk about kink with a capital K.
All caps, kink.
Exactly. And we invited Stephen B to join us and talk about it because of his unique experience with kink. And so, Stephen, I want to turn it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Lulu, and thank you, Bonnie. And I'll just start off by saying I'm not an expert. This is just my experience, and we're talking about kink and sobriety, right? And how we detangle what we experienced as kink and sex before we come into the rooms and afterwards. I think when I talk about my journey into kink, it starts with my sponsor. When I came into the rooms, my sponsor told me, in the first year, you can fuck anyone you want, just don't bring flowers. And he also said, if I'm going to start having sex in my first year, because just that's not common. I think that in some sponsor circles, people say don't have sex in the first year.
Yeah.
And, my sponsor made it very clear it's okay to have sex in the first year, but I was going to need to find a place to talk about it on a weekly basis. And we talked just about family. I was going to need a family of mentors that I could talk about anything. We might call that a home group, right? And so my home group became this a meeting at 9:30 on Friday nights here at the Castro Country Club called Sober Kink Together. It's been going on for almost 12 or 13 years now. And it was in that space that I was able to share freely. But more importantly, what was happening in that space for me was I was hearing from other women and men who had more experience than me that, for better or for worse, I projected great things onto and maybe put on a pedestal. And I would hear them all say the exact same thing. Put your recovery first and everything would fall into place. And I came into this program in a relationship I'd been in a relationship for 15 years. And I used pretty much different substances throughout different parts of that relationship. And when I came in, I was, so I think a lot of us come in spiritually broken, but I was emotionally very wounded. I thought at that point, I had been a circuit queen for a long part of my life. I had this blonde-haired, blue-eyed 20-year-old. But when I came in, I'd been drinking for 7 years at that point. I had stopped going to the gym. I basically was just hiding in my room. And so I came in feeling unattractive, unwanted, and unlovable. And, my sponsor made it very clear to me that wasn't the case, but the only way I was going to believe that was through experience. My sponsor was able to offer perspective, but it was only through experience. I think the thing that I hear all the time is, oh, I can't go to that meeting because I'm not into kink. And I think that's what I try to say to people is that's a very narrow understanding of what kink is. I think when people think of kink, they're thinking of BDSM, right? Bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, sadism, masochism, right? But really what kink is about, I think, goes really to the heart of recovery, which is recovering these true parts of ourselves. And, something I say, over and over again, especially in the beginning, but for me, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey over these 7 years, I didn't know what I wanted because I didn't know who I was. And I say this over and over again. Recovery is a journey of discovering who I am in a relationship to myself, to other people, and to a higher power. I'll probably touch on higher power as a big thing. Yeah. I'll just say very quickly, I say to sponsees and I say in the group all the time, if you can't bring your higher power into a bathhouse, you need another higher power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's been something that's been an important part of my journey. But I think that if I just break it down into years, my first year in recovery, I was terrified. Folsom was too much for me. Dory was too much for me. And, our program makes it very clear if sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves into service of others. So my first 2 years, I didn't go to Folsom, not because I was afraid of relapsing, but it just wasn't the right place for me. And I think a lot of us come into the program thinking, oh, I need to get this right in the first 30 days, the first 60 days. And that I did not have perspective in the first 90 days or 60 days to not judge myself as not a failure. I was judging myself through the lens of the last 15 years, before I got into recovery. And just being told by these women and men that I admired that some of them said, I didn't have sex for 3 years. One of them said, I didn't even think about kink until I was 5 years into the program. Another one said, I didn't know a lot about kink, so I did what I did with everything else. I took a class. Or some had said, like we do in everything in recovery, I asked for help. I reached out for mentors. And that in itself was a big process because, before I came into recovery, I was terrified of not having the answers and of asking for help. And so these parts of recovery have contributed to me coming to understand, who it is I am. I mentioned in my first year, my sponsor said, find a group, and so I made this an important part of my recovery, in part because it just happened to be that on Friday nights in the Castro at 9:30 at night, there weren't any sober spaces.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the Sober King Together group had a kind of a, let's say, charism, a mission of holding space in the Castro every Friday night for newcomers till midnight, to the point of like putting fries on the table at fellowships, and newcomers would feel like they had a safe space.
Yeah.
And so I fell into this group. But there was also a Thursday, it still exists, the Thursday Sex Into Me UC meeting, Sex and Intimacy.
Yeah.
I
secretaried that meeting for a while.
Yeah, I secretaried that meeting. Actually, I was secretarying just recently until we had an election, so we could have an election. But I like to describe Sober Kink as the older sister that went off to college that writes home and tells you that it's going to be okay, right? And we started a love and sex meeting, love, sex, and relationships meeting in another program here on Monday afternoons, which no longer exists, but. Going to them on a weekly basis at the noon meeting on Thursdays allowed me to hear from members who had more experience, which reassured me that things were going to be okay. And going to the after dark version
exactly.
on Friday nights allowed me to talk openly about the things that I was insecure about.
Yeah.
And, I just think that in the first 2 years of my program, I dated people in the rooms and I got to explore their kinks. I used to joke for the first maybe 3 or 4 years that my kink was whatever yours was, but just taking it up a notch, right? I can see that's one of the people-pleasing traits that comes along with being an adult child, a child with trauma, abuse, and neglect, right? It wasn't until I never would have thought rubber would have been something that I was attracted to. My service sponsor, my mentor, Patrick Miska, who's no longer with us, used to sit next to me every single Friday night, and he wore rubber head to toe.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I never would have thought that would have been something that I enjoyed until one day I was with a fellow. We were at Mr. S Leather, and he was shopping for something. I put something on, and I was like, "Oh my God, it feels good!" Right? I think it wasn't until 5 years in the program that I discovered rope, and and I think the thing that's important to understand is that kink isn't about sex.
Yeah.
Kink is about an expression of intimacy. And there are many ways of doing that. I've spoken very openly about my experience with depression, being on 4 medications at the same time. And that certainly had an effect on not just my attraction to other people, but my libido. And so I don't need to be horny to tie someone up, right? I think the other thing that, I discovered about rope, I've been working a program around being an adult child, about being about recovering the true self within in relationship to a higher power. And in that program, I discovered, when we say one of the promises, we will learn how to play and have fun in our lives. And kink is an expression of play. It's an opportunity to try something, without feeling judged. I think that in a lot of our communities, there are gatekeepers who say, this is the way these things have to be done. These are the people that can come into this. And I think that there are certainly narrowly defined kink groups, right? And I think to the exclusion of gender expression, to exclusion of kink, right? But I think there's more of a openness. I think, for example, in the leather community, I think gay men have begrudgingly allowed non-cisgender males to come into play spaces, right? As long as they identify male. Whereas in the kink community, I think one of the things that I've advocated and other sober kinksters have advocated is a sense of pangender, that all gender expressions are welcome into the kink community.
Nice.
And pan kink, all expressions. There's not, leather is a large subset, but it is not. I mean, particularly with like young people coming in, who they can't afford leather, or they have judgments against leather. They're coming in through pup play. 10 years ago, no one was talking about pup play.
Yeah.
Or they're coming with neoprene. So there's different ways of entering this community. And as a community, even though we have subsets of what turns us on, we ideally would be here to support each other, and more so in the sober kink community.
So something so in our readings, it's like we talk about, we don't want to be the arbiter of anybody's sex conduct or anything. And when I think sex, I'm talking about the gamut, not just the actual sex itself. But what I do say, and I shared it, we have a love and intimacy meeting. Anyway, I always say, like, okay, we don't want to be the arbiter of anyone else's sex conduct, but you need to be the arbiter of yours. One of the dualities or the struggles that happens when I come in, okay, so I'm an adult and I obviously had sexual experience or whatever, but like you were saying earlier, like I'm not in a place, I'm not able to kind of navigate in the way that I need to, or I have fear. But while I have that fear, I also have that fear of telling people I have that fear. And so sometimes I act out because I think I need to. We're in a community, an environment that says, you need to be doing this, where they're not really saying that, but that's what I believe they're saying. So for you, being the person that you are, and you have a gentleness and you have a kind of authoritative kind of you like, if I come into a space, I'm gonna think, yeah, that's the guy I want to talk to. How do you help these individuals, these young people who eventually, and when I say young, again, I don't mean just young age-wise. I mean young in their understanding of who they
In
are.
recovery, yeah.
And recovering. How do you help them kind of focus on what they need to focus on so that they can get to the place where then they can have these experiences with kink that are going to be healthy and going to help them to grow and become the people they're supposed to, you know?
Yeah.
Because I'm of the belief, like, all experiences aren't good experiences, and they can be more damaging if you are not mindful.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it starts with having safe, sober spaces, right? Like my sponsor said in the beginning, you need to find a group where you can talk about this on a weekly basis, a home group. And so, for example, the Thursday I could hear people with experience. The Friday, it's more of a topic study. So I would hear about different topics, and then I would listen to my mentors, right? And so we do it the same way, other people in recovery, have done it for us, reassuring me that it's going to be okay, reassuring me that if I work the steps, everything's going to fall into place, reassuring me that my insecurities are normal. Hearing someone with 5 years or 7 years saying, I didn't even think about this until I had 7 years, or I had 11 years in the program before I began to explore these things. I think that also just, when I work with sponsees, reassuring them that, that they get to explore who they are in relationship with a higher power, right? Our program doesn't say, well, I think in one of our texts, it doesn't say that we will go out if we fall short of our, God's ideals. It says we need to look at the motives.
Yeah.
And I think this may be controversial, but, when we do kind of an autopsy of a relapse around sex, it's not in my experience, it's not the sex that takes people out. It's the dishonesty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I say to sponsees all the time, you can lie to me and you're not going to relapse.
Oh.
You might even be able to lie to God and not relapse. But once I begin lying to myself, it's all over. And story after story after story, and in my home group, I hear that, I knew I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have driven that way home from work, or, I knew I shouldn't be. For example, with me, I'd heard over and over and over again, don't have sex with people who are high, right? When I was 3 years into the program, my first three sponsees all got a year, and my sponsor said, all right, enough. Now you need to get a stable of 4 men that you can practice with, right? And, he meant at the same time, what I wound up doing was doing them serially 90 minutes. But I was with this guy that was using poppers, and we dated for almost 6 months. But I remember saying to my sponsor, poppers are not my thing. And what I couldn't hear him say, what I didn't hear at the time was they aren't your thing until they become your thing. But what happened for me in my experience was there was a day when I was having sex with this guy, and I looked down at him and I realized he wasn't in the room.
Yeah. Oh.
And I'd heard people talk about this over and over and over in my home group, but I heard it up here, but not in here. And so I had this experience, and I told my sponsor, and he goes, yes, this is old behavior. You're fucking someone who's not in the room with you, And so at that moment, it became this moment. I had another experience at 5 years where I had, now I've got more experience, and I'm working out a specific scene with someone. And we talked for 3 days to work out this scene. And I made it very clear, I'm an addict in recovery, and I can't have, drugs there. You need to be sober, all of these things, and he said he understood. Now, when I met him at a safe space, I should have known when he was wearing 3 sweaters that there was probably something wrong. But here's my point.
3 sweaters and 1 checked in.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
in a suitcase. But, here's my point. I was attached to a certain outcome. I wasn't open to letting my higher power guide me.
Yeah, exactly.
And because I was attached to a certain outcome, I discounted the evidence. And so that's the beginning of being dishonest with myself. And he gets into my apartment. If I can tell the story quickly, he gets into my apartment. We start taking our clothes off and he offers me G in my apartment. Now, to be honest with you, the truth is I didn't throw him out. Because I was attached to a very specific thing that I wanted to do and a result that I wanted to come out of this, and about, I basically said something, you're not going to fall out, are you? And he was like, no. But, 2 hours later, I go into the kitchen to get us some water, right? And I come out and this big cloud of smoke comes out of my bathroom, right? And I threw him out.
Yeah.
But that's not the point of my story. The point of my story is I went to my home group that night and I felt so ashamed. At 5 years, I should have known better. At 5 years, I should have acted differently. At 5 years, I should have thrown this man out. But one of my mentors sat next to me, and he's got maybe almost 10 years more than me. And he said to me, without moralizing or reprimanding to me, he said, how did you feel after sex? And I said, oh, and he goes, do you want to feel after sex?
Yeah.
And I'm getting goosebumps. Look at that. I'm getting goosebumps hearing that, one of my, a friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, Stephen H. would say, don't confuse your effort with God's grace.
Oh, I actually just told that to a sponsor today. Don't mistake God's grace for personal strength.
Yeah.
It's like, just don't do it.
And so I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore. I don't sleep with people who, and on my profiles, I'll say sober. Matter of fact, in some of my profiles, it says at the bottom, nothing turns me on more than eating a guy's ass than talking about, sober kink or sober sex. So,
and part of my experience with kink, I think for me, like just with sex in general, I wasn't necessarily like I've had more sex in sobriety than I ever had drunk or high. And also the more I was sober, the more I came to and the more I became aware of just more, and I have a lot of sexual trauma in my background. And I remember kind of going through these processes of feeling like some of my kinks were some sort of like maladaptive response to a sexual assault. And I remember that brought up just a lot more shame for me. And it also so then I would repress it, or I would kind of push it away, definitely not talk with anyone about it. And then I would kind of if you will, I would only say a relapse in it because I wasn't completely comfortable. I didn't know how the behavior was affecting me and how I felt for it. So I would say just that I relapsed into it because my plan wasn't to keep doing it. But I kept finding myself, wanting to enjoy this kink that it scared me, to be honest. It was more around sexual assaulty kind of, role playing stuff. And so I ended up, getting a therapist to try to start looking into it. And then I also decided to just become more curious, to say, okay, this is something in me. This is something that I'm curious about. This is something that I'm doing. What is it that I'm seeking from it? Am I getting what I'm seeking from it? That sort of thing. And so I think once I was able to kind of just become more curious about it, I began to have a little bit better relationship with it. And so I have that kink still. You know what I mean? But I've learned how to kind of hold it. And I guess I say that in the sense of I didn't come to understand that until I was mm, I'm 13 years sober now. So probably 9 years sober, 8 years sober, 9 years sober. It took me some time. I remember early on realizing that I wasn't present during sex, that I was somewhere else, it was and so I think, I guess, could you speak to kind of the correlation between kink and trauma, I guess?
yes, absolutely. I think that I've heard people, talk about how certain kinks can be cathartic. It can
Mhm.
help in healing. But there is also, and then there are, certain things that we do that I hear, I think sponsees are pathologizing, that don't
Mm.
need to pathologize. But then
Yeah.
there's trauma. There's real trauma and there's real abuse. And you mentioned not being present in the body,
Mhm.
dissociating, something that, the symptoms that I have now or the symptoms that I had then, I now understand are
Mhm.
actually the side effects of PTSD, of trauma and sexual trauma, right? And you're absolutely right. Those kinds of things need outside help.
Mhm.
Need outside help. I think that the only thing I would add to what you said was fantastic and right on point. The only thing I would add to that is that in recovery, we don't have to have these conversations in our head. We
Right.
don't have to, you need to have these conversations on our own. And that was the great that I mentioned it right from the beginning. My sponsor saying if basically I would say the same to a sponsee who's going back to work. If you're going to go back to work, get in a community where you can talk about what it's like to be sober and be in work.
Yeah.
Right. If you're going to work in a certain profession, get into, that involves exposure to certain things. You need to have other people in the program you can talk to about, or I need to,
Or
that
have the willingness to do it.
yeah.
Because that's for me, one of the things that I do. Like I was thinking, it has been at the top of my sexual idea for some time. I want to feel dirty during. I don't want to feel dirty after.
Yeah.
And
Well said.
what helps me is making sure that I'm willing to talk about what it is that I'm doing, because I know that I'm moving into a dangerous area if I'm taking actions and I'm being dishonest, or if I'm not talking about it. And not talking about it is a lie of omission,
Yeah.
and that's just as bad. And I think that it has been very helpful because, like, I by talking about it with people and people that I love and like trust, I'm taking I'm demystifying the things, because I tell my sponsors all the time, if it has a name for it, that means it's already been done, so that you don't get to take credit for being this devious person. It's like it's something that's already out there.
Yeah. Well, I think of your earlier question when you asked what can we doing for people coming in, the people who are new to kink or new to recovery, and it's something very similar, right? I completely lost my train of thought.
Take your time.
Yeah,
We'll start.
like
Go
a
ahead.
suggestion for newcomers.
Well, that's this is the thing, right? Because this is the mistake I make. I think that when I have the question, I'm going to ask for help, right? I think that self-will, self-discipline, self-confidence, self-knowledge are going to work. And they work a lot of the time, but they will always fall short. There's a reason why we ask newcomers to go to 90 meetings in 90 days or make a check-in every day for 90 days. It's not because they need the check-in every day. It's because we're building the habit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if I'm not building a habit by going to a recovery, whether it's a group or it's a coffee, like a coffee munch, if I'm not building the habit on a regular basis of talking about issues around sex or issues around kink, it's not going to come naturally for me.
Yes, exactly.
And if there's on top of that, if there's shame, either internalized shame or shame from my peers, because I hear this in the rooms.
Yeah.
It's I hear in certain meetings, people will say they will yuck someone else's yum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so if I have all those things on top of me and I don't have the habit of going to, for example, from my case, going to Sober Kink for every single night, every single Friday for years, if I'm not in that practice, I'm not going to reach out.
Yeah,
I think I am, but I'm not going to.
I would say like with my recovery, I have to be vigilant. Like I used for a certain amount of time. And so in my mind, I still haven't gotten to that place where I've been sober longer than I've used. And so this is brand new for me. And like you're saying, it's like, if I'm not putting it into practice constantly, then I'm going to do what I know how to do. I'm going to slip into that place of shame or that place of like not trusting, and I really appreciate what your sponsor was saying about finding that group. Finding anything to do, find a group, your tribe, people that get that you are not perfect, you're not going to be perfect at, and who are okay with you, like asking the questions and not being certain and kind of easing your way into situations. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think there's a difference between I think sometimes when we think about kink, it's like it's kind of part of an identity or it's something that you claim. And so I think there's a difference between I'm in kink and I'm part of a community. Usually, if you're in that sort of setting, there's conversations, there's less likelihood for some sort of harm. I think there was a long time when I wouldn't have called what I was doing kink. Like I didn't have a relationship with it that it was kink. And in those situations, it was actually more dangerous. I was putting myself in very, compromising positions in part because I wasn't owning one that I was into kink, but two, I didn't have the community because the community has like the guidelines and I know I got a mentor in kink eventually, and had somebody like kind of teach me stuff. But I think I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up. I think kink feels more like a choice, like or like it's something that you're full aware of. It's not necessarily like I don't know. Did you know what I'm trying to say?
I do, and I think if there's a golden rule of kink, it's consent.
Yeah.
And
Right.
consent can never be implied, and it can never be presumed, right? And so if I'm, drunk or high, or my partner's drunk or high, there is not consent.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
we are not in a position to give or hear consent or but you know what I'm saying? I think that what I do want to say is that it was about 5 years, and when we talk about exploration, it was 5 years into this program before I had a different understanding of integrity. Integrity was an answer up here, which meant if I said I was going to be at a meeting, I was going to be there. If I said I was going to have a commitment, I took the commitment. But it was about 5 years into the program or to recovery where I began to have an experience of recovery here, experience of integrity here.
Mhm.
And what that meant was Stephen was Stephen 80% of the time,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
In 80% of the environments, right? And, here at the country club, at the dry dock, at work, all these different things, which allowed me to look at the 20% where it wasn't. My family of origin,
Mhm.
sex, vocation, and what I was doing basically outside of recovery, And so the first one I looked at was sex. And, here I've been going to 2 sex meetings a week for 5 years. And, it still wasn't happening here.
Mhm.
And I mentioned that earlier, what I was doing was responding to what other people wanted to do.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to explore, I'm taking flogging classes now, but it was because someone else wanted me to take a flogging
And
class
not
with them.
because yeah.
You know what I mean? I got into, kind of naturally came to, was, my mentor was very much into rubber. I kind of naturally came to that through my own process of discovery. But rope is because someone else wanted me to go to the beach with them, and we put a handbook out on the beach, someone sober, and we looked at this handbook and we tied each other up. What I discovered through that was it was like play,
Yeah.
and I needed to have play because, unless there are places you can't put rope on someone's body,
Yeah,
but for the most part, there's no critical parent.
Yeah.
But I needed to do the work.
Yeah.
I needed to do the work, not alone. I
Yeah,
can't
exactly.
do the steps and apply them to
Yeah.
sex or any area of my life alone. I needed to do it with a sponsor. I needed to do it with other women and men in a home group on a regular basis where I could start to begin to ask not what I wanted to do. I think it's the mistake that I made for 5 years. What is it that my kink is? What is it that I want to do? And that was revealed to me to the extent that I knew who I was. Once I began to understand who I am in relationship to others, myself, and a higher power, then all these other things start coming naturally. Right?
Mhm.
I came out as polyamorous in 2001, and it was very much like coming out as gay. I had an experience, but didn't understand the experience. It certainly didn't have language. I remember
Yeah.
reading an article in the Chronicle about this polyamorous community living up in up in the Marin somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
Today we throw the word polyamory around. I think polyamory means to be able to be in multiple intimate relationships with people at the same time. I see on the apps, oh, I'm polyamorous, but that really just means it's an open relationship.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I got the impression it's like a lot of people just say it. They don't really know exactly what it is. I try not to judge, but I'm whatever.
Well, I think they think that it's not that there's a right way or wrong way of defining polyamory, but it's not my experience of polyamory, right? And currently, I'm in 3 relationships, but I was in 4 relationships. One where was
4 is the magic number for you, huh?
well, yeah, exactly. It's like, well, I was in. I am the mistress isn't the right word, but the male example of a mistress in 2 marriages right now. There's open communication among all the partners. It's a sexual relationship, but it's also an intimate relationship, and it involves things outside of the bedroom, right? I was in a dom sub relationship. What that helped me to understand is I don't like being a dom.
Yeah.
And I've said this, we say this over and over in our group. There's being top and bottom and dom and submissive,
Yeah.
right? They're not the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
One is a position, one is a kind of an attitude or
Yeah.
a way of showing up.
We've been talking about the idea of being a switch. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I think verse is the new
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Just fisting is the new bareback, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. But
There,
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say there is like a question
Oh, yeah.
in the comments. So Larry says, I just left a long-term relationship and I'm 57 years old, coming up on 5 years sober, and I have no idea how to meet somebody. Went to a gay-owned restaurant bar, had a burger after a meeting the other day, and it felt wrong or weird. So I'm not sure what. Don't even know how to meet someone at this point in a sober environment. Any thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. It's like a 5 years sober. I think that like what we were talking about getting to know who you are, getting to know where you are and what's comfortable, because like gay owned, like, or should I say gay bars are, not everybody gets down the same way. I mean, I'm the worst. I'm the worst because it's like at different times. I don't have any room to meet new people. So and that's a privilege I have. But
this is a really common question because it's a really common problem. And thank you for sharing this, because it really touches to something that a lot of us feel. I can talk from my experience. When I came into the rooms, I thought, how am I ever going to meet someone outside of a bar? Are we getting a signal or someone stretching?
Yeah, no, he gives us our 10 minutes.
Oh, okay, all right. How am I going to meet someone outside of a bar? And the truth is, most people meet people outside of the bars.
Absolutely.
I just did not have the skills or the knowledge to do that. I talked earlier about attachment, being attached to a certain scene. If I'm attached to finding someone, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen. I can only tell you what my experience is. My experience is to throw myself into service.
Yeah.
You asked earlier about one of the things we can do to bring new people in. Sober Kink Together for over a decade has been holding sober meetups, either around education, like rope tying, or I think the one that most people know here at the Country Club is the sober meetup, kind of bookending Dory and bookending Folsom.
Yeah.
So by throwing myself into service, someone was a mentor to me, was a sober buddy to me at my first Folsom. Right. And so today I can be a sober buddy to someone else.
Exactly.
Right. And so being of service in these sober kink related events, or it's everything in recovery is contrary to common logic.
Yeah.
I think that I want this, so I'm going to go in that direction, but it's never like that.
Yeah,
it's always doing it another way. And my experience has been, for example, the sober meetups. How this works is we meet for 90 minutes at a Kink coffee house before the event. It gives people a chance to take a deep breath. A lot of people show up and say, "Hey, are you a friend of Bill's?" Like people who have no knowledge of it.
Nice.
And I make new friends. And then we go to the event for a certain amount of time. We bookmark and go to a meeting afterwards.
Yeah.
I think another event that Sober Kink Together does is we may go to like a gear party or a sex club, not like works, but like the Citadel or like the Catalyst. And we do it the same way like we do everything in recovery. We this is what I would recommend. We go to a meeting. Then a group, we get spiritually fit. Then we go to the space like the Citadel. We huddle up and say the Serenity Prayer. And I remember my first one. I was just so terribly anxious and frightened, right? Because I am thinking about how do I have to perform. But I remember walking around the corner and saying, "They've got spinach dip." How can I take myself seriously when they're serving spinach dip?
Oh, I love
right?
that.
But my point to your question was, I wound up meeting all these wonderful people there. People that weren't in my immediate fellowship, but I wound up meeting all these people. And so I can't tell you what the answer is for you, but what I tell sponsees and because it's been my experience and what was mentored to me was in recovery, service is the solution.
Yeah, service.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, I know I'm not one to like, and this is like whatever, but I don't tend to like date within the program. Like, so that for me, that's just a boundary that I've had to have. That might be something I grow out of. So I think but I think you can still take the same approach. And like, I know back when I used to run programs with young people, we would say, volunteer somewhere, in something that you like, if you're into dogs or you're into like whatever, and then you're going to meet other people that are interested in the same thing when you're a volunteer, which is hard. Or you like get it on a league like a volleyball or softball or kickball or whatever it is kind of a way just to get you into a mix with people who you have something in common with. But I know the challenge is a lot of those environments aren't full of sober people. You know what I mean? And so I think that's kind of the challenge that comes into play is like, do I then choose to date in the sober community because I know it's sober, or then there's that aspect of having to kind of go out in the world.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I hear that suggestion made, and it helps a lot of people. And I also think that there's a continuum, right? I'm going to date people in the rooms or I'm not. And we're actually, the thing about recovery is that's not the conversation. The conversation's up here, right? I had a very firm boundary after dating 3 guys in the rooms for the first 2 years, and I said I would never do it again. Never do it again. And I never did it again. And then I wound up meeting a man through my home group online during Zoom, and we just started talking about recovery in the parking lot after the meeting, and at some point he expressed his interest in me, and I said, I do not date men in the rooms, period. And this went on for a couple of weeks until my sponsor said, why won't you date him? And I said, well, we've had this rule. And you know what he said to me? He said, that rule served you really well when you had 2 years. You made that rule when you had 2 years. You've got 6 years now. Explore it. And now now this man's my boyfriend. Now he lives in Philadelphia. I'll just say that. He calls himself the boy from PA with a PA. So that's all I'll say. But we have,
and he's a beautiful person.
Yes, he is a beautiful person. We don't sponsor each other. We have different sponsors, right? But what we have is we are growing together along a spiritual path, not the same spiritual path, but the same type of spiritual path. He has a sir, he's in a relationship in Philadelphia, or actually, I'm sorry, with someone in Baltimore. I'm, like I mentioned, in other relationships. I think that, back to
it's like the 6 degrees of separation from Steven.
Well, I think that this goes back to the question, right? Because I think that the solution is to put myself out there, and our program doesn't say that. Our program says, we turn it over to our higher power and we throw ours. I'm not telling people to do that, but our program does have an answer, and the answer is throw ourselves into service. And throwing myself into service doesn't mean I'm going to start fucking people in the rooms.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Because I didn't do that. That's not what I did for 4 years, right? But throwing myself into service exposed me to other people. Having that group of sober people that went to Folsom together, I wound up meeting all these other people in rubber. And I've dated some of them. So
nice. Well, this was a lovely conversation, and I must say that it's just the beginning, like most of our conversations, because there's so much more to talk about, but we only have 45 minutes to do so. But I want y'all to know that if you want to get in contact with me, you can do that through my Instagram, LouieLou86. And usually they're just fun pictures of me being silly, but you can also send me a direct message and tell us what you want to hear about too. And how about you, Bonnie?
Yeah, you can connect with me, Bonnie Violet, at A Queer Chaplain on all the socials.
And then our amazing, wonderful guy, Steven. That was wonderful. I really,
so much.
I feel like I've learned a ton. But is there anywhere where you'd like people to come?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both actually for holding this space. We can only have this if you two or if people are holding these kinds of spaces. I'd say people can reach out to my home group on a private Facebook page, which I think is tinyurl.com/SKT, Sober Kink Together group. And I'm also available at S. Bauman SF on every social media platform, including Kakao and in Korea. So
nice. And Rule 62 on the other.
Yes, exactly. And Rule 62 on most of the major hookup apps.
Right on. Yeah. So I want to remind everyone that the Castro Country Club is a clean and sober gathering place for all people and a home for the queer recovery community, located in the heart of the Castro in San Francisco. We endeavor to be a space where all can seek wisdom, serenity, courage, and joy. And you can find more information at castrocountryclub.org.
Yes, or you can send us a voice message by reaching out to our Speak Pipe.
I know we've been trying to get people to use our pipe for a long time.
Nobody will use our pipe. It's just not happening, I think. So yeah, click the link in the description and you can leave us a voicemail that we can then include in a future episode.
Absolutely. And you can email us at podcast@countryclub.org.
Watch us every week at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube.
And we do want to remind you that we are not we are not ambassadors for any program. What we do is we speak from our experience, and so it's like if you received anything from us, just know that it's based on our experience, and yeah.
And join us next week when we talk about grief and loss.
Grief and loss, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow for more information and all that good stuff. We love you. Bye, Bonnie.
Ta-ta.
Thanks,
Thanks, Stephen. Bye, everyone.